Hello everybody in Guitar Land. In this video I want to talk about my pedal board. Now you might be thinking, why do you want to talk about your pedal board? The reason I want to talk about my pedal board is because I haven't had a pedal board since I started playing, and I've been playing since, well, 1984 I think I started. So I've been playing an awful long time, and in all that time I've never actually had a pedal board. You might ask, why on earth haven't you ever had a pedal board before in all that time? And I think this goes back to some really bad experiences I had with effects pedals when I was just starting out. So when I first started I had this really cheap distortion pedal and a really cheap flanger pedal, and they sounded absolutely awful, so awful that I couldn't wait to stop using them. And you've got to realise that back in the 1980s there was a kind of revolution in guitar equipment at the time. This kind of rack type equipment was really popular. We were getting preamps and power amps in rack units, and we were getting these multi-digital effects where you had all the effects you possibly want or need in a single rack mount unit. So I basically got one of those, and that's kind of what I stuck with for the last 20-30 years or so. I only really tended to use them for delays and reverbs, and even then when I was recording I wouldn't even use anything when I was recording. I would just add effects at the desk. So things like choruses, flanges, all that, those kind of modulation effects I just basically didn't use. So a while ago I went into a guitar shop in America and I thought I'd just try a phaser pedal out. And I tried the TC Electronic Helix phaser pedal and it was absolutely awesome. So that started my renewed love affair with effects pedals. And it hasn't escaped my attention that effects pedals now seem to be really popular. For the last sort of 10 years or so, there's a proliferation. There's been an explosion of all kinds of different types of effects pedals that you can get, so many different manufacturers and different pedals that you can get. So I'm embracing that, and I'm really glad I have, because there's some absolutely fantastic effects pedals out there. And are they better than what you can get in a rack unit? And I kind of coming to the conclusion that they're not necessarily better, but with pedals, of course, you can choose the exact effect combination you want, different manufacturers, mix and match your pedals, and get something that's way cooler potentially than any multi-effects unit, a rack mount multi-effects unit, because you're kind of stuck with whatever they give you in the multi-effects rack units. And there's something very organic about them. Of course, you can get a lot of analog pedals as well as digital pedals, and the way you can mix and match them, you can get all kinds of really great effect, as I've come to realise. So in this video I'm going to, as a sort of born again pedal user, I'm going to go through my pedal board. And of course, if you're a pedal expert, you probably don't want to watch this video, because I'm not going to be talking about anything you don't already know. But I kind of thought, because I've amassed this fairly simple pedal board, I'd run through what's on it and what I think is kind of important to have on a pedal board if you're going to use a pedal board and not a multi-effects unit. I mean, there is one thing to comment about cost. I think it goes without saying that you can get an awful lot of different effects. You get a lot of bang for your buck if you get a cheap, maybe even second-hand multi-effects unit. I mean, I have a Rocktron IntelliFX in this rack that only cost like 120 quid second-hand. And if you're just starting out and you've got a limited budget, then it's not a bad idea to consider getting something like a multi-effects unit, rack mount, or you can get multi-effects units that are sort of built into a pedal board as well. So you might want to look at one of those, because I think if you acquire separate pedals like I have done on this pedal board here, that can certainly, I think, end up being potentially a lot more expensive, because, you know, an individual pedal on my board here could cost as much as £200. Some of them are a lot cheaper than that, but it can very quickly start to add up, and then you've got to get a power supply and then the board itself. So it's not necessarily a cheap way of getting a variety of effects. Okay, so that's that out of the way. Let's get on to talking about my pedal board and what I've got on it. Okay, so at the beginning of my pedal board I've got this Boss compressor, and then from the Boss compressor I'm going into a distortion pedal, then I'm going into a wah pedal, then I'm going into a phaser, then a chorus, then another chorus, and then finally I'm going into a tremolo pedal, and then into my preamp. And then here I've got, in the effects loop, I've got a delay pedal, and I've got a looper pedal. Okay, so this is a fairly basic pedal board, but it covers most eventualities, most scenarios. Obviously I will be hoping to add to this in the future, and there's a couple of really cool pedals I've got my eye on. But let's go through the pedals that I've got and why they're here and what they do. And if you're new to pedal boards, or you're looking to put a a pedal board together for the first time, you know, you might pick up a few tips from what I've done here. So first of all, if you're going to build a pedal board, you need something to put them on, and I've got a pedal train pedal board here, and it's sort of box section aluminium. It was about £120, so it's not exactly super cheap. And of course, you could always make your own. There's nothing stopping you making your own out of wood, or out of metal. If you know, depending on your sort of DIY skills, you could fashion your own, which would be kind of cool. But it is nice to have a purpose-built board, definitely. Then the other thing you're going to have to consider is you're going to have to power your pedals as well. A lot of pedals now are digital pedals, and if you put a 9-volt battery in them, it's going to suck that battery flat in just a few hours. You don't want to be mucking about with batteries. So you really will need to be getting a power supply. On my pedal board, I've mounted a Mua power supply. That was about £80–90. So again, you know, you can see how the cost can start to add up, but I'm afraid it is something you're really going to need. You can probably get cheaper power supplies than that, but again, it depends how many pedals you're powering. So this Mua power supply that I've got here has got enough outputs to power around 8 pedals. It's powering everything on this board. Actually, it's powering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and with the Boss compressor, I've had to use a separate power supply to power that. So again, if I want to start adding pedals to my pedal board, I'm going to have to go and get another power supply. But you know, look, you're just going to have to resign yourself to that. You're going to have to power your pedals. Okay, so we got the board, we got the power supply, and then next let's go through the pedals that I have on my board. So the first pedal in my signal path is a compressor. It's a Boss compressor, a CS3. So I've never had a compressor pedal before, so I don't really know how this compares to other compressors. It seems to be pretty good. I'm fairly happy with it. What I will say though is this is the only non-true bypass pedal on my pedal board, with the exception of the looper, I think. So all the other pedals, the distortion pedal and the maul and the wah and the phaser, they're all true bypass pedals, and what that basically means is when you switch them off, they don't interact with the signal passing through them whatsoever. So they don't affect the tone, they don't, like I say, interact with the signal at all. In fact, I believe even if pedals are unpowered, you should still, your signal should still pass through them. So it's basically like when you switch them off, it's essentially just like a piece of wire running from the input to the output. But the Boss compressor pedal is not true bypass. What essentially that means is whether it's switched on or switched off, the signal is effectively going through a basic op-amp circuit. It's going through active electronics on the pedal. Now some people perhaps don't like the idea of that because they think when I switch the pedal off, I don't want the purity of my signal interrupted whatsoever. And that's definitely a valid point, because some pedals that are not true bypass may affect your signal fairly significantly, and I must admit the Boss compressor pedal does have a noticeable effect on the tone when it's switched off, and for that reason, if I'm not using it, what I'll often do is I'll actually just physically unplug it, and I'll put the input jack from my guitar straight into the distortion pedal and just cut the compressor pedal out completely. But there's a reason. I mean, you typically want a compressor pedal at the beginning of your signal path anyway, but because it's the only active pedal that I have in my pedal board, there's another, there's even better reason to put it at the front of my signal path. You may have heard of buffer pedals. Well, buffer pedals are essentially an active preamp pedal that when your signal goes into it and you switch it on, it will boost the signal and compensate for any potential losses that you might have from an excessively long cable run. Now I only use my pedalboard in the studio. I don't play live in a band or anything like that anymore, so I don't need to worry about that particular consideration. You will see videos on YouTube where people demonstrate what bypass pedals are actually really for and what they can do, and there's a great video where someone demonstrates how your signal can degrade as you go from like a 3-foot cable to a 10-foot cable to a 30-foot cable, and just how the buffer pedal helps ward against undue signal loss or signal degradation from very long cable runs. Now in theory, an active pedal like a compressor pedal like this may have a similar effect to a buffer pedal, so if I did have a long cable run, this compressor pedal may sort of restore some of the sparkle of the signal if I've lost a bit of the high-end frequencies from a long cable run, but that's not the reason why I have it in my signal path. Like I say, I have it to act as a compressor. So what does it do? Well, let's play, that's a power chord. Okay, let's switch it on. So it does what it says on the tin. It squashes your signal flat, just with it off. So it sort of compresses the dynamic range. It makes the feel of the guitar a little bit more sensitive. It's very good for clean country, that kind of, country guitar players use it a lot with a clean signal. If you compress it heavily, you get a very distinctive sort of twang. But for rock guitarists like myself, it can kind of have just put it on. So for rock guitarists like myself, what it kind of does is it will make the guitar a little bit more sensitive, a little bit easier to play, but it sort of obviously squashes all your dynamic range. So if you pick very softly on a note, it'll end up sounding just as loud as when you pick really hard on a note. So when you're playing fast, it can just make it a little bit easier, perhaps, to get a certain kind of sound going when you're playing really quickly. Okay. So after my compressor pedal, I've got this MXR distortion pedal, MXR Prime Distortion. Distortion pedals are usually fairly cheap, so most guitarists have got one, or an overdrive. Just in case anyone doesn't know out there, there is actually a subtle difference between a distortion pedal and an overdrive pedal. What an overdrive pedal effectively does is it doesn't actually distort the waveform that's going into it, it just amplifies it. So if you've got a sort of sine wave, which is typically just what the signal looks like when it comes off a guitar, going into it at a certain amplitude, the overdrive pedal will just sort of increase the amplitude of that wave. So when it hits the preamp section of your amplifier, it then pushes the amplifier into distortion, so your distortion tone will effectively be coming from the amplifier rather than the overdrive pedal. But the overdrive pedal, like I said, just pushes your amp into distortion. Whereas a distortion pedal actually does change the waveform significantly. It actually adds a distortion at the pedal. So if you're playing at low volume in your bedroom and you want that distortion tone, maybe a distortion pedal is the thing to go for, whereas an overdrive pedal is probably more suited for pushing particularly a valve amp into, you know, crunchy or heavy distortion when you're, you know, cranking the amp fairly loud. But okay, you know, so there is a basic difference between the two. I will be getting an overdrive pedal because I've got some sort of vintage valve heads that it's nice to push them into overdrive. Okay, so I've got an MXR. You can sort of hear what that does. That's I've rolled off the distortion, rolled off the signal on the volume, and I'm just switching the distortion pedal. Got the compressor on as well. Okay, so I think most of you know what a distortion pedal is, right? Clues in the name. After the distortion pedal, I'll scroll my signal back up onto 4, I've got the Morley wah pedal. Okay, so wah pedals are something that I never really used very much until I, you know, got back into pedals recently. I've actually had this wah pedal for years. I bought it about 20 years ago. I just didn't use it very much. But now I've built this pedal board, I'm using it a lot more, and wow, what a cool effect a wah pedal is. And as you kind of get used to using them, obviously there's a real skill to using them. You can come up with some really cool licks. It's a very organic pedal because it sort of reacts to what you're doing with your foot. Obviously, don't mind my naff slippers here, but. Very cool, very cool. I did say earlier that I've got this delay pedal in the effects loop here. It's a Canyon Echo from Electro Harmonix. I did have a look at a few different delay pedals, and I was looking at the TC Electronic Flashback. That was kind of expensive. The reason I was looking at the Flashback there was because it's stereo, whereas the Canyon Echo is only mono. But I opted for the Canyon Echo in the end because the only reason I have a delay pedal is just for sort of practicing, and if I want a little bit of ambience when I'm practicing. I don't really need a stereo one because when I record completely dry in terms of reverbs and delays, and I add reverbs and delays on at the mixing desk, or on the computer I should say, because you just get much better sound in recordings typically if you do it that way. Of course, there are certain types of delay effects that you might need to play along with. You know, if you're doing something like the Edge's U2, where you've got that constant repeating delay effect, then obviously, well, then you need to record with that switched on. But anyway, so I've got this Canyon Echo in the effects loop here of my preamp. And just to say, I'm actually using a Marshall JMP1 preamp here, and I'm going through a solid state power amp, the Marshall valve state. So yeah, let's put on the Echo and then put on the wah again. Nice. And also in my effects loop, I have this looper pedal. I've got the Nux loop core because it was kind of quite a bit cheaper than the Boss looper pedal. and a few others that I looked at, and it's got a really impressive spec. I'm not going to go into exactly what it can do. In fact, in this video I'm not really going to talk about the details of any of these pedals too much, because I might do separate videos in the future where I go through each individual pedal and show what each pedal can do in more detail. But here I'm just kind of going through the generality of my pedal board setup. But the looper, if you don't know what a looper does, what it does is it'll record a section of your playing when you push the pedal button down. So you sort of start playing, you push the button, it'll record until you push the button again, and then when you push the button again, it'll play it back. Now the loop core has got sampled drum kits in there as well, so you can sort of set a tempo, pick a drum kit, so you can actually start playing along to the drum kit, and when you're ready to record a riff that you want to jam along to, then you hit the pedal, record, and when you're finished, hit the pedal again, and then play it back. And I've got to be honest, if you don't have a looper, you should definitely get one, because they are an incredible aid to practice and composing. And what you can do on the loop core as well is you can actually, I think it's got something like 100 patches on it, so it will remember 100 separate loops that you put in it, and I think you can actually download them to a computer as well, store them on a computer via a USB wire. I haven't done that yet, but yes, there's no doubt about it. A looper is a really good compositional tool, because you don't have to mess around recording yourself on an 8-track or a digital audio workstation. You can just quickly fire up your looper pedal and off you go. For example, sorry, I'm not really warmed up here, but I'll play this instrument here. Yes, obviously hours of fun with a looper, and get one if you don't have one. They really are worth their weight in money. They're great. Right, so I was at my wah, wasn't I? After the wah pedal, I've got probably my absolute favourite pedal on my pedal board. I've got the TC Electronic Helix pedal. This pedal is absolutely wonderful. TC Electronic, I salute you. You have made an absolutely awesome pedal here. Everybody knows, well, most people know that Eddie Van Halen famously used a phaser pedal when he was recording classics like Eruption and other great songs on his early albums. And I think he may have used an MXR phaser pedal, but anyway, he has, there's a Van Halen signature MXR phaser pedal. I went into a guitar shop in the States, and I was over there on business, and I asked to try out the Eddie Van Halen MXR phaser pedal. And they said, well, yeah, we got that, but we also got this one from TC Electronic, the Helix. And I was playing the pedal together, and I thought, wow, this Helix pedal is way better than the MXR. Well, when I say better, is it can do everything that the MXR pedal could do, and a whole lot more. It is quite a complicated beast, because as some of you may be aware, TC Electronic pedals are digital pedals, and they've got quite complicated digital electronics in them that you can actually reprogram. So it comes with sort of default a default program that whereby you control the parameters of that program with your traditional knobs. But if you plug it into a computer, you can actually reprogram the algorithms inside such that the knobs on the pedal do slightly different things to what they do in the sort of default with the default algorithm. And they call this the tone print, and you can upload a new program, if you like, to the pedal either via a USB cable or using, believe it or not, your mobile phone. And you can download programs that other people have created or create your own. So it's a very, very flexible pedal. It's obviously a digital pedal, so some people might not like the idea of that, but I've got to be honest, I think it's an absolutely fantastic sounding pedal. It is. I think it sounds absolutely awesome. It's very expressive, very vocal, almost a little bit like an auto wah. So, like I say, when I bought it, I was comparing it, A/B'ing it against the MXR Eddie Van Halen model phaser, and I thought this could do everything that the MXR phaser could do, and a lot more. So I opted for this phaser. Okay. So the next modulation pedal that I have on the board, because basically all of these effects after the distortion are modulation effects of one kind or another. What we mean by that is you're modulating the waveform of your guitar signal. We've got the wah, we've got the phaser, we've got the chorus pedals. Flanges are another modulation pedal. I don't have a flanger on my pedal board yet. I will be adding a flanger shortly. But chorus pedals, well, I think chorus is probably the most Marmite pedal that you get on pedal boards. You either love it or you hate it. Very closely associated with 1980s music, and as you can tell from my t-shirt, I'm a big fan of all things 1980s, including the music. And you don't know what chorus pedals sound like, and you almost certainly will. They sound like this. Oh, you just can't beat a bit of chorus, if you ask me. Just beautiful. This is an analog chorus, so this is the MXR analog chorus, and then after the analog chorus I've got a Boss CE5 digital chorus. Now you will, on other YouTube videos, hear lots of arguments for the pros and cons of digital analog, and I'm not going to get into all of that here. In my opinion, if a pedal sounds good and you like it, then you should get it, irrespective of if it's analog or digital. Generally speaking, analog pedals are perhaps a little bit more warmer sounding, perhaps. It's a bit of a cliche, but it kind of, in my experience, seems to be generally true. And what I tend, in the way I use my chorus pedals here, I tend to use the analog pedal for slightly for heavy metal, heavy rock, hard rock riffs where I want a sort of chorusy tone. And I'll use the Boss pedal when I want a sort of bright chorus effect on a clean tone, where you want that nice sort of sparkly, clean but chorused tone, and the Boss is good at that. But it's also done good with distortion tones, as you should hear. Oh, like I said, I love a bit of chorus. Anyway, after my chorus pedals, I'm going into a tremolo pedal. Now, I've never had a tremolo pedal before. Like I said earlier in the video, I haven't really had any pedals much before this last couple of years. But tremolo as an effect was something that I hadn't really ever used before. But that was a big oversight on my part. You kind of typically associate tremolo with like country, bluesgrass type players, but you can actually do some really cool things with tremolo pedals, and here I've got this little Mua, this little baby pedal, this little, it's called the Trelicopter, nice name, but it's essentially a mini tremolo pedal. And what a tremolo pedal is, it's another modulation effect, but here you're just modulating the amplitude, making the signal slightly louder, quieter, whereas all the other pedals like the wah, the phasers, the choruses and a flanger, sort of not only, they're modulating the frequency of your guitar tone, so you end up with much more audible kind of pitch, slight pitch, very subtle pitch variations that are modulated at a sort of certain frequency. Whereas a tremolo pedal doesn't do any of that. All it does is, like I say, modulate the amplitude. If I switch it on, you'll hear that. But this is the thing with tremolo pedals that I've recently come to realise, is that they're not so noticeable when you've got a heavily distorted guitar signal, because a heavily distorted guitar signal is already naturally compressed. So when you feed that into a tremolo pedal, or if you've got a lot of distortion or overdrive on your preamp, putting a tremolo pedal before a heavily distorted preamp, you're not going to notice it so much, because the preamp is already sort of saturated at the lower amplitudes of the tremolo pedal, so when it goes to the higher amplitude it doesn't really saturate anymore, so the effect is far less noticeable. However, if you really back off on your sort of volume pot on the guitar, your signal, if you're playing clean, that's when you really notice the tremolo effect. You hear that? I'll just slow the frequency down a bit. And you can get some really ambient sort of effects with tremolo pedals, especially if you sort of mix it up a bit, mix it up like with a wah-wah pedal. Put a bit of delay on. Yeah, so it's just a really cool effect that can inspire you to create new riffs, new tunes, new music, and that's the great thing about pedal boards, and that's, you know, why I'm kicking myself that I haven't been using effects pedals earlier throughout, you know, my playing career, if you like, because they're just so awesome, and the fact that you can sort of mix and match different manufacturers, different effect types, you can get sort of really unique combinations going, and they can really inspire you to come up with new music, as I am pretty quickly realising. And so I am an absolute born-again pedal user, and if you're new to pedals, or maybe you want to get back into pedals like I have done, then hopefully this video has been of interest to you. If you've got any suggestions for some cool pedals that I might want to add to my pedal board, please stick them in the comments section. I've got two pedals that I really do want to add, and that is the Boss phaser, PH3 I think it is, it's the green Boss phaser pedal. And I've seen some videos on YouTube where that's been demoed, and it's got a really cool, one of the waveforms that does the modulation. I mean, it's got this like square wave, and it's got this random step wave thing as well, which is something that the Helix phaser doesn't have, and that's mind-blowingly cool, so I definitely want that. And then flanger pedal, I haven't got a flanger pedal. Now, yeah, what's the difference between flanger and chorus? Well, I'm not going to go into that here now, but in other videos I hope to put up in the future, yeah, I'll maybe go into some of the individual pedals I've got on my pedal board in a little bit more detail and discuss the differences between things like choruses and flangers and phasers. But I want a flanger pedal on here, and I've got my eye on the Boss flanger. I think it's the purple, is it the BL3? I can't remember what it's called now, but it's basically it's the current Boss flanger pedal. That looks really, really nice. Sounds great on the YouTube video demos that I've seen of it. So yeah, as I say, if you've got any suggestions for some pedals that you really like, that you think I should check out and stick on my board, let me know. I'd be very interested to read it. So yeah, that's me talking about my fairly primitive pedal board with renewed excitement, because like I said, I'm a born again pedal user, and I've seen the light of just how bloody awesome these little things are. So yeah, that's me talking about my pedal board. Over and out.